It could be a bit difficult to pad out her character since you've never actually met her. Ignoring Barry's flippant lack of tact, I fingered the ripped shreds of paper, lamenting, "But all those wasted hours agonising over the perfect words to put on the page, now lost forever." Well, it's not as if you have to give up on the idea of writing a book. Just start again fresh and make it read less like a critical report you've penned for the Food Standard Agency. Marigold says you still haven't gotten the hang of using exclamation marks instead of full stops, but if you keep at it, you might pick up the style. Marigold's obsession with moving abroad books had left her with a misguided impression that the pages ought to be indiscriminately littered with superfluous exclamation marks. In truth, I'd be as likely to take literary advice from my wife as I would from the cat. I decided I would start over, but keep the manuscript well hidden from my wife's prying eyes and the cat's destructive claws. "How did Marigold persuade you to do her dirty work for her?" I asked, reflecting that perhaps the book would be improved if I made it more Greek-centric, and dispensed with the intimate details of my leaving do that marked the close of my illustrious career as a public health inspector. Perhaps including the speech I gave was a tad unnecessary. I decided to take a pragmatic approach. I would rewrite the book, and at least the pile of shredded paper would serve as much-needed mulch for the compost heap. She threatened that if I didn't destroy it, she'd show Cynthia the photographs of me with that haircut, Barry confessed. "Not the mullet!" I cried, wide-eyed with horror that my wife would resort to such devious blackmail tactics to get her brother to do her bidding. Marigold played really dirty. She threatened to show the mullet one with the moustache. Barry winced. It wasn't a pleasant recollection. Even though he had insisted at the time that it was the height of fashion, the tacky mullet and moustache combined to make him look a real plonker. I can see why you gave in to her blackmail. It's a bit early in your relationship for Cynthia to be confronted with the most embarrassing images of your past when you're still trying to make a good impression. "It's good of you to be so understanding," Barry said, in relief. It was impossible to fall out with my brother-in-law, even if he had just shredded my literary masterpiece. Barry had flown over from England, ostensibly to visit us, but in reality using us as an excuse to spend time with Cynthia, an Englishwoman living in Meli whom he'd met when he'd first driven us and our worldly goods over to Greece in one of his removal vans. It was obvious that the pair of them were head over heels. Since Marigold was keen to encourage the budding romance, in the hope that Barry would spend more time in Greece, it struck me as unlikely that she would follow through with her threat to flash an unbecoming picture of her moustached and mulleted brother in front of Cynthia. I decided to ask Marigold where she'd stashed the offending photo. It would amuse me to introduce it as a conversation starter with some of the elderly Greek widows in the village, who had taken rather a shine to Barry. It would, no doubt, prove helpful in expanding my Greek vocabulary to include the synonyms of frightful. I intended to spend the afternoon stuffing my brain with as many Greek food-related words as I could cram in preparation for the evening ahead. Earlier that morning, Marigold had popped into the village shop for some kourabiades, almond biscuits. She thought a crafty decorative sprinkling of icing sugar may be enough to fool the ladies of the cemetery gathering into thinking they were homemade delicacies hot from her own oven. She returned from the shop with the dreadful news that Dina, one half of the couple that run the local taverna, had suffered the misfortune of falling off a haphazardly balanced olive tree ladder, breaking her arm in the process. Not just any old arm either, but the one she favours when cooking, Marigold relayed. Poor Nikos is at his wit's end, and is talking of having to close the taverna until she's got her arm back. He just can't manage alone, and his useless son Costis is off on one of his hunting trips, chasing down wild boar. Well, it makes a change from chasing women. That's terrible about Dina, though. Is she in much pain? I asked in genuine concern. Dina was a delightful lady. She always had a warm smile on her face, despite her heavy workload helping Nikos in the fields and the taverna. It was a lot of work for a couple.